Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 56. The Means to Fight. Alarms blared loudly in the 12th Division, and almost everyone there looked panicked, rushing to send messages and analyze the data being input. Only two were unhurried: Kuritsuchi Nemu Fukutecho and Kuritsuchi Mayuri Taicho. Mayuri's smile widened as he read the data flowing down the enormous screen at high speed. Good, good, good. Nemu, fetch Amagai and see if he has that hunting party ready. I want one of these Togabito on my slab tonight. Hi. Nemu bowed lightly and walked purposely away, unperturbed by her father's wicked grin and the chaos around her. A few moments later, Mayuri frowned, seeing something unexpected. What is that Kurosaki doing? Why can my machines still detect his Reiatsu, and why is he not fighting? There is a Togabito right next to him. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Did he capture one already? He does have Urahara nearby, but if he captured that one, why hasn't he gone to help the others? Two test subjects are better than one, after all. Mayuri's frown descended into a scowl. This is pointless. If neither the Togabito nor the Transcendent are fighting, then I should pay attention to the Togabito that are. He directed his attention to another part of the screen, carefully searching for some weakness that he could exploit. This could be interesting, a Quincy and that woman against a Togabito. His smile returned. I could not have asked for a better experiment. The effects of a Quincy on Hell's minions, and that woman's barriers. Come now, make this a nice, drawn-out battle. I need all the data you can provide. Khan watched his true opponent carefully. Thus far, Zamari had been content to use Ishin to attack. Thankfully, it seemed that while Ishin's movements were controlled, he still retained some measure of control over his Reiatsu, as evidenced by his slower-than-usual Shunpo and having not released his Zanpakuto. With that sort of handicap, Khan was able to narrowly avoid every attack so far, but he had yet to get close to Zamari. He ducked under a telegraphed swing of Engetsu and dodged to the side. Damn it, I can't keep this up forever. But at the same time, he loathed the idea of using his power on Ishin. He acknowledges me. He and Ichigo, he danced out of the way of a flurry of swipes. They see me as a person. What are you doing? Ishin demanded. It's not easy to hold back Zamari's commands, you know. Hurry up. Damn it, I don't want to hurt you. But Khan knew he had no choice. It was either attack someone he held dear, or lose those he was entrusted to protect. Damn it, he screamed as he finally called on the supernatural strength he'd been gifted with upon his creation. Rushing up to Ishin, he twisted around a stab and unleashed a powerful kick to Ishin's ribs, sending him flying back into a nearby street lamp, which promptly crumpled. There was no time to check if Ishin was all right. Khan dashed at Zamari with all the speed Ichigo's body combined with Khan's leg enhancements could muster. Seeing Zamari point a finger at him, he threw himself to his left, feeling a burst of spiritual energy breeze past him. Can't stop now, I have to get him. For Karen, for Yuzu. Pausing for just long enough to take a breath, Khan launched himself at the puppet master again, bitterly satisfied when the Togabito adopted an expression of slight panic as he pointed all 5 fingers of his left hand in Khan's direction. Sensing the incoming invisible attack and giving thanks for the heightened abilities that came with being a mod soul, Khan leapt up and over the attack, landing on the other side of Zamari. Close enough that one kick would finish it. He twisted as he hit the ground, converting his forward momentum into rotational, his right leg charged with all the power Khan could muster. It was a kick that Khan was sure would end this fight. Look out! Hearing Ishin's voice right behind him, Khan abandoned his kick and instead used his left foot to leap up off the ground into the branches of a neighbor's tree just in time to avoid being stabbed from behind with Engetsu. Damn it, I was close. Khan took a moment to quiet the pounding of Ichigo's body's heart. I'm lucky that Ichigo's been training in this thing. My powers enhance what's already here, and Ichigo is already pretty damn strong. Not so easy, is it? Zamari taunted, looking around but unable to see Khan as he hid behind the trunk of the tree. That was a good try. I did not anticipate such a burst of strength and speed. But now that I know of it, I will not let you get that close again. With a mere twitch of his finger, Ishin moved into a guarding position. Or have you run away? Khan grit Ichigo's teeth. Karen, damn it, What I wouldn't give for a good long-distance attack right now. He looked around for anything he could use, and something black and white caught his eye. A soccer ball, Karen's soccer ball. Almost against his will, Khan began to smile, the makings of a truly delicious plan taking shape in his mind. Santon Keshun. Inoue's barrier came into place just in time to protect herself and Ishida from another onslaught of tentacles. Uryu. The Quincy threw himself to the side, bringing his bow to bear. Licked region. He clipped out again, once more firing a volley of hundreds of arrows. That's not going to work, Gunjo reminded, shielding himself with a wall of tentacles before sending 3 to snake out at the humans. Tsubaki. Koten Zanshin. Without hesitation, Inoue's attack sliced through the incoming attack. Uryu, do you have another attack that can strike from below? Ishida hid behind Inoue's shield once again. Yes, but it needs a little preparation. Can you keep him occupied for a moment? Inoue nodded. Go. Ishida promptly vanished with the speed of his Harenkyaku. Foolish, you shouldn't have left the girl's shield, Gunjo mocked as he immediately attacked the vulnerable Quincy with dozens more appendages. Inoue bit her lip in determination and threw her hands up towards Ishida. Go. Santon Keshun. Koten Zanshin. The fairies that made up Inoue's shield flew into place and materialized the shield in front of Ishida without a moment to spare, while Tsubaki attacked Gunjo directly. HMPH. Annoying woman. Gunjo maneuvered his tentacles to attack Tsubaki in every direction before he could slice the Togabito. And then, he struck, obscuring Tsubaki from Inoue's sight. An audible crunch was heard, and Inoue froze. No, the appendages withdrew, and Tsubaki's broken form fell to the ground, reverting into a part of Inoue's hairpin before breaking into 3 pieces. No. Tsubaki. Such a fragile attack, Gunjo taunted. That edge is certainly sharp, but it was all too easy to crush it from the sides. Now then, be a good girl and die. I think not. Ishida reappeared next to Inoue, stabbing a seal Schneider into the ground. Thank you, Orihime. You bought the time I needed to complete my technique. What technique? Gunjo looked around. All I see are 5 of those things around me. And what are they supposed to do? This is an ancient Quincy technique. You may not have noticed, given how you haven't left that spot since we began, but you can no longer move. So, I can attack from here. Ishida took out a single silver tube. Perhaps, but what you don't know is that those items are seal Schneiders. They absorb the reishi in the environment around them, gathering them for a simple, fitting purpose. He uncapped the tube and slowly began to tilt it over the seal Schneider in the ground in front of him. Everything within this pentagon is subject to a single, powerful attack. A single drop of sparkling silvery liquid fell from the tube and landed on the weapon. Spranger. Tsubaki. Inoue cried out. Lily, Hanagaku, Bagan. Get Tsubaki out of there. Inoue's shield dissolved into the 3 fairies that maintained it, who then flew into the pentagon as the seal Schneider lit up and formed glowing blue pentagon with the others. Each fairy grabbed a piece of the hairpin that Tsubaki formed from, and rushed outside just in time to avoid the blue rush of power that traveled from each seal Schneider to the center, where Gunjo stood. And then, a pillar of light erupted around the Togabito and he began to scream. Several seconds later, the light faded and Gunjo fell to the ground, his eyeless sockets exposed to the light, his clothes burned almost completely off. No tentacles remained, not even Gunjo's arms. Damn you, I'll be back, and I will return this humiliation upon you, humans. And then he crumbled to ash. But Inoue paid no attention to that, her full concentration on the broken hairpin. Soten Keshun. She materialized her healing barrier around the hairpin. She bit her lip when she saw that the hairpin was very slowly repairing itself. It will take some time, Orihime, Lily warned her sadly, flying up to her face with Hanagaku and Bagan. It's more difficult to reject damage to our own power. Inoue nodded acceptance. All right, she whispered, wiping tears away from her eyes. At least he'll be okay. Chad breathed heavily. Akane was very good at dodging his attacks and had been slowly wearing him down. She's too fast to hit normally, he thought to himself. Then let's try my Paso del Viento. Chad brought up his right arm just in time to block another long scratch, and then used his high-speed technique to get behind her. Lemuert. The gentle giant had trouble following what happened next. One moment, he was unleashing his most powerful attack, the next he had Akane's legs tightly gripping his neck while she performed a handstand. And then he was impossibly lifted off the ground, in an arc above the Togabito, before being painfully slammed head first into the roof of the school. Ow! Chad had had some painful experiences in his life, but apparently his head and neck was not quite as durable as the rest of his body. It was lucky that his unleashed powers helped that, or else he might well have had his neck broken right there. Even so, this was an opportunity. Chad's left hand gripped one of Akane's legs and pulled it just away enough for him to breathe, while his right hand lashed out at the Togabito. El Directo, he choked out. Akane covered her face with her arms just before being engulfed in the light of Chad's technique. After several seconds, the light faded, and Chad was astonished to realize that she was unharmed. What? The chains, Akane whispered. Your power isn't enough to break these chains. No, but it's enough to break your leg. Chad sent power to his left hand and with a single forceful clench, crushed the leg to pulp in his hand. Akane screamed in terrible pain and jumped away with her remaining leg before falling to the ground, helpless as blood poured beneath her. Chad got to his feet and made his way to her, listening to the Togabito cry and whimper at the injury. Sorry, he offered, staying a safe distance away in case she pulled out some other technique to use. Akane turned her head towards him, her face tear-streaked and regretful. Don't be, she replied, sniffing. You only did what I asked. Hurry and kill me. Don't leave me in this agony. As you wish. Chad charged his left hand one last time, approaching her. Akane didn't move in response. May you have a better life when you awaken. Lemured. He plunged his fist into Akane's chest, punching through her ribs and pulverizing her heart. Chad kept his power tightly reined enough that the skull pattern did not appear on the school rooftop. That would be difficult to explain. Then, Akane's body and chains glowed with a dull red light, and below her a portal opened. Her corpse fell through it, and before Chad could do anything about it, the portal closed. Damn. Chad closed his eyes in mourning as he deactivated his arms. She is still trapped. Hell, still has her. All she wanted is to be free, to start over in a new life, his fists clenched in suppressed fury. Hell took her for rejoicing in the end of her slavery. No soul should suffer so. No soul should be forced into one torment after another. No soul should be a mere slave both in life and in death, when all it desires is freedom. Akane, I will help you reach the next life. I swear it. Renji breathed out and relaxed as the Togabito he and Rukia were fighting finally went down. That was Shrieker, he asked, wiping some blood from his forehead. Rukia nodded, taking a moment to catch her own breath. Shrieker had focused almost exclusively on her, and she was already tired from training against Sota no Shirayuki. Combined with Shrieker's use of Hell's chains to block and tangle Zabumaru and his sound-activated explosives, it had proven a long and difficult fight. Renji had gotten hit by those bombs twice, when Rukia hadn't been quite fast enough to freeze them all with one of her dances. Tough bastard, Renji admitted. You said Ichigo took him down when he was a newbie. Yeah, Shrieker got a little too close, and Ichigo ripped his tongue right out of his mouth to prevent him from being able to blow up his artillery. Yeesh, brutal, but he didn't have to deal with those chains. True. Rukia took another deep, steadying breath, reaching out her Reiatsu senses. Ishida and Orihime are done, it feels like. So's Chad. Ichigo's dad seems to still be busy, and, she frowned. Something's not right where Ichigo is. What about Hitsugaya Taicho and Tosen? They should be out here fighting too. Rukia concentrated harder. Tosen is, still in Urahara's basement. That's strange, he's been there since yesterday. If he's been meditating the whole time. What about Hitsugaya Taicho? He's with Tosen. So are Urahara, Tessai and the Vizard actually. She shook her head. What's going on there? I'm telling you, it's not a good idea for you guys to go out right now. Hitsugaya yelled. Why not? Hiyori demanded. There are Togabito out there, and we're supposed to help guard Karakura, right? Because, Urahara commented as he approached the others. This is a test. What? This is a test, Urahara repeated grimly. This is an information game, Hiyori. Hell is testing us, testing our ability to defend ourselves. You are all aces in the hole, just as Ichigo-kun was against Aizen. We shouldn't let hell find out our true strength, not yet. But we were in hell, Kensai pointed out. Wouldn't he know about us anyway? No. Remember, Ichigo was there, and he was the only one he paid attention to, Yoruichi disagreed. But this test works for us as well. It tells us how strong Ichigo's human friends are, and where they need their training. If we just crushed this incursion, they wouldn't learn anything, which would prove lethal against later invasions. Exactly, Urahara agreed. All of us need to get stronger. The only time we bring all our forces out is in the final conflict, and now is not the time. You all have only had a day to get used to being Arrancar and using Resurrection. Use this time wisely. Much as I hate to use him as an example, look at Tosen. Hitsugaya pointed out the meditating man. Even now, he's trying to get stronger through Jinzen. Damn it. Everyone quieted as Shinji stepped to the front. Guys, they're right. Think about it. We're acting like rookie Shinigami who just got their Shikai. Oh, Luki, I have Resurrection. Let's go kick some ass and take names. He mocked. Well, Ichigo did pretty well, Love muttered. And you'll notice he doesn't know any of his unique hollow powers besides high-speed regeneration, Shinji replied scathingly. We need practice, and there's only so much practice we can get on each other. What are you suggesting? Rose asked. We fight our inner Shinigami. Who better to fight than ourselves? Who knows, we might even get their swords and be able to use Shikai and Bankai while in Resurrection. There was a moment of silence as everyone tried to digest that idea, before Kensai spoke up. That's a good idea, fine. That seemed to be the trigger, as one by one the other Arrancar assented to the plan. Upon hearing Ichigo's agreement, Shuren nodded once, though he kept his fire sword activated. Alright, we have to move quickly. Cut my chains before hell realizes what's going on and takes control of me. Ichigo grimaced. After he'd viewed Cazador's memory of watching Kokudo be strangled by hell's chains with merely a thought, Ichigo knew he couldn't put it past hell to have that power. But he still didn't like the idea of letting Shuren loose before the Togabito had resurrected his family. Then a thought occurred to him. Neither of us know whether you'll be able to work the pool without hell's chains. We'll have to risk it. I'll cut your chains after they're revived. Shuren scowled but nodded in reluctant assent. Fine, then, but the plan will need to change a little to minimize risk. What do you mean? If you cut my chains, hell shouldn't be able to sense me, Shuren explained. We could take your family with us and let hell's Reiatsu finish readying their souls for the reincarnation process. But you've got a good point. So I need to bring hell's Reiatsu to your family. And we should fight, just to keep up the facade so hell himself doesn't step in. Fine. Ichigo stepped back inside Urahara's shop and came out a few minutes later with Yuzu and Masaki. He sat them down, and Shuren quietly opened a portal to hell. Then, the fighters looked at each other, and in unison flared their Reiatsu and lunged at each other. Hachi, who had followed Ichigo, quickly flung up barriers around the pair of fighters and Ichigo's family so that hell's poisonous miasma would not impact anyone else. Ichigo swung Zangetsu at Shuren viciously, who flung his fiery sword up to block. A moment later, the Togabito lashed out with a fire orb, but this time Ichigo was ready for it, having fallen victim to that same tactic in hell. The Vizard jumped up and over Shuren before lashing out at the Togabito's back. Getsuga Tensho. Twisting around, Shuren thrust both hands in front of him and unleashed a torrent of fire to combat the Getsuga. The flames managed to overwhelm the crescent attack, but Ichigo was no longer in their path. Ichigo flickered beside the Togabito, Zangetsu in mid-swing, making Shuren leap awkwardly to his right to avoid it. The Togabito was unable to avoid it entirely, though, and took a cut to his arm. A weak cough caught Ichigo's immediately attention, and he nearly got speared through the chest for his distraction. Luckily, Hachi threw up a barrier just in time between them, and the fire spear dissolved. Ichigo, Yuzu. Ichigo appeared by his sister's side with a flicker of Shunpo, kneeling. Yuzu was coughing, but was definitely alive. Holding Zangetsu to the side, he wordlessly entered Bankai and drew his Ijuka's mask, flipping his Reiatsu to its evolved state. Hachi, hold the chain out away from her chest. Of course. Hachi clapped his hands together, concentrating. A few moments later, Yuzu was being held upright by a few barriers, and her chain, short though it was being held taut as far out as it could go. Tensa Zangetsu suddenly seethed with the power of a Getsuga Tensho, and Ichigo prepared himself with both hands. Yelling, he brought down the sword of his soul. Chain links fell to either side, and Ichigo watched carefully as the chain of hell dissolved away, leaving only Yuzu, though her chest was bloody from where the chain had emerged from her physical body. Hachi immediately began healing her, and only a minute later, Yuzu opened her eyes. Ni. Ichigo had taken off the mask and reverted back to Shikai immediately after cutting the chains, and kneeled down next to her, carefully shielding her from the Reiatsu coming out of the portal to hell. Yuzu, he whispered, you're okay now, just rest. Yuzu shook her head no. No, Ni, I have to tell you something. What is it? Hell, when I could feel hell. He touched my soul. Ichigo barely held back from growling angrily. What did he do? Yuzu began to cry. He made the chain hurt so much. When he touched my arm, it burned. He said I would die soon and be damned to hell. And then he laughed. She shivered and drew in on herself. I told him you would save me, that you had beat Aizen and you would beat him too. He smiled, and said that he'd met you. He has plans for you, Ni. He wants to use our family against you, and force you to join him. Ichigo gave his sister a hug, pulling her close. I won't let that happen, Yuzu. Don't go to hell, Ni. Please, I have to, Yuzu. Mom still needs to be saved. Yuzu clutched her brother harder. She knew there was nothing she could do or say that would convince Ichigo to stay. And she wanted Masaki to be revived too. Just don't die, Ni. Not for her. Mom wouldn't want that. Ichigo's eyes closed for a moment. I know. I won't die. If we're done with the touchy-feeling reunion, can we get on with this? Shuren cut in. Look, the woman has finished dying. Ichigo looked. Masaki's chain was glowing, and only a moment later she fell into a portal that opened beneath her. He locked eyes with his little sister. Time to go, Yuzu. I need you to stay with Hachi here until I get back, all right? Yuzu wordlessly nodded and stepped back to stand next to the barrier user. I'll keep her safe, Hachi promised without prompting. The Transcendent nodded as well. Let's go. About time, Shuren snarked. The two of them stepped into the portal, which promptly closed behind them. Emerging in hell, Ichigo looked around. They were on the top level. Why here? We're trying to stay discreet. One of the standing orders Hell gave is to capture as many souls as possible and to try and draw out the Kusanada on this level, Shuren explained. Hell will have thought that I created that portal to throw in any humans who came by. But we have to act quickly. Let's move. Nodding in understanding, Ichigo followed Shuren as they found a point to jump down to the next level. Doing so, the pair of them didn't bother to stop and just dove straight through the water separating them from the third level down, delving deeper into the hell dimension until they emerged in the desert area. Landing lightly, Ichigo and Shuren promptly took off at high speed towards the lava-like pool. Just like Shuren had said, it was being guarded by 4 black hooded figures. Keep him busy, Shuren ordered. Just hurry up and revive my mother, Ichigo shot back, drawing Zangetsu. He flickered into Shunpo and appeared right in front of one of the figures, who was obviously surprised by the sudden attack. Getsuga Tensho. Caught completely off guard, the figure was promptly bifurcated by the crescent attack. But the wizard had no time to celebrate. 2 of the 3 remaining guards were closing in on him, and the last was backing away in. Ichigo's thoughts were interrupted with the need to move. He leapt backwards and promptly deflected a downward sword strike with Zangetsu, before flickering away just in time to avoid being crushed by a large, spiked war hammer. 2 on 1, huh. Then let's even the odds. With a twist of his left hand, he manifested the white Zangetsu. Which was lucky, as a split second later, the white Zangetsu inadvertently blocked a bolt of some kind that had been fired from the long-range assailant. He glanced that way and stiffened in surprise. That's a Quincy bow. Ooh, tricky. You got the fast slicer, the slower crusher, and the long-range archer. Who are you going after first? Ichigo scowled. Archer first. If he's got Quincy powers, it's probably going to be like fighting Ishida. Best to get him out quickly so he doesn't come up with a very irritating strategy. You'll need someone to keep the other two off your back, and you don't got your friends with ya this time. Manifest me, you don't want to use your mask here in hell anyway. The wizard was about to reply, but had to take a few moments to simultaneously avoid another round of bolts and kick the sword user to a slightly safer distance. Slightly safer meaning a dozen meters away or so. Why don't I just use Bankai? Do not use Bankai, or release your seals, now, Ichigo. You'll attract the attention of the remaining Kusanada, as well as Hell himself, if he is not already on his way. It would be best to remain discreet. Ichigo had to concede that Zangetsu had a point, though he thought discreet was hardly the word considering the fight he'd gotten into. Sensing Cazador's impatience, and admitting that he couldn't deal with all three fighters at once, Ichigo pulled. Cazador de la Luna materialized with a wicked grin, eyeing the two melee fighters as he drew his own black and white Zangetsu. Ooh yeah, he breathed, his smile growing impossibly wide. This'll be fun. I've got this, King. Go deal with the Quincy. The wizard didn't bother to respond. Instead, he flickered into Shunpo and threw his white blade at the Quincy, who dodged easily. Ichigo continued to charge right for him, using his black blade to block and deflect the flurry of shots that the Quincy delivered, and then yanked on the cloth that had wrapped around his left arm. Ichigo's opponent evidently saw this coming and leapt up and used Harenkyaku to try to put some distance between them, moving to fight in the air. Ichigo paused for a moment to see how Shuren was doing. He was standing in front of the pool with his materialized chains dipping into the pool, and saying something that the Transcendent couldn't hear. Satisfied that Shuren seemed to be doing his part, the wizard gave chase to the Quincy he was fighting. As he approached, the Quincy drew his bow back and said the first words that Ichigo had heard him utter. Licked region. Shit. Ichigo flickered into Shunpo, trying to dodge to the side of the onslaught of arrows. He succeeded for a moment, but then the Quincy followed him and it was very clear that Ichigo could not evade forever. Well, if I can't dodge, and I can't block my entire body, then it's time to punch through. Holding both Zangetsu above his head, he swung down as hard as he could. Getsuga Tensho. A purplish-blue Getsuga, twice as tall as Ichigo and 3 times as wide, roared out, eradicating hundreds of spiritual arrows as it sought out the Quincy. Ichigo took the brief respite to concentrate and control his power. He needed to keep the enemy from firing on him. Lucky for him, he knew the perfect spell for that. The Quincy materialized mere feet behind him, a powerful arrow cocked and ready, but Ichigo smirked. Mentally giving thanks to Hachi and Tessai, he pointed the right Zangetsu at his opponent and quickly incanted, Bakudo 4, Heinawa. Glowing chains materialized and promptly bound the Quincy's arms to his sides in a way that Ichigo had struggled to do during his Kido training. The wizard immediately lunged for him, but was surprised when the chains seemed to dissolve, leaving the Quincy able to instantly fire the arrow he'd saved. Ichigo had barely been able to bring the blade in his left hand up to deflect it away. What the hell? How did you get out of my chains? That prompted a stifled laugh from the hooded figure. I am a Quincy, foolish boy. Those chains were merely constructs of reishi. I merely absorbed the reishi that comprised them, and your spell fell apart. There is a reason we were able to fight the Shinigami so well in the war, only their highest levels of binding could keep us bound. Ichigo blinked. You must have been a very powerful Quincy when you were alive. Who are you? The Quincy lowered his hood, revealing strikingly familiar features. My name is Ishida Haken. In life, I was a highly respected elder. Now, who are you, and why did you come to hell? Ishida. Ichigo made a mental note to ask Ryu about Haken later. I am Kurosaki Ichigo, substitute Shinigami, wizard. I'm here to revive and rescue my mother, who was banished here by Shinigami nobles to hurt me. What sin sent you to hell? Haken chuckled, and there was some quality to it that gave Ichigo's arms goosebumps. I assure you, I deserve to be here. I was one of the elders who refused to see reason regarding our arrows destroying the souls within the hollows we slay. I was one of those who forced the Quincy massacre to occur. The number of souls I killed with my arrows, he shook his head and laughed lowly. That strange quality had gotten stronger, and sent shivers down Ichigo's spine. And it turns out that neither side was right. What? Our arrows don't destroy their souls. Haken cried out. But neither do they become purified. No hollow killed by a Quincy arrow returns to being a plus soul and sent on to the afterlife. Then what happens to them? Ichigo had a sinking feeling that he knew the answer. You wanted to know my sin, boy. Haken laughed again, and now Ichigo could recognize the madness in his eyes. My sin was not forgiving the dead for that which they are not at fault. My sin was damning them all. Because every hollow cut down by a Quincy, and all the souls they consumed, end up here in hell. Every last soul comes here to hell, to stay. Chapter 57. Failure and Resolution. Zamari looked around dismissively. He hadn't been able to sense his opponent from the beginning, but that was hardly surprising. He hadn't needed to be able to actively sense people for a long time, long before he'd even met Aizen. With his eyes, he'd been able to see everywhere around him and capture his attackers with his Amor. On those rare occasions when it was needed, Zamari had Pesquisa, the Arankar sensing skill. But now that he was a Togabito, deprived of his many eyes and forced to rely on only the two he'd been born with, Zamari was having difficulty keeping track of where his opponent was. It looked a great deal, no, almost identical to Kurosaki Ichigo, but Zamari dismissed the possibility. There was no enormous Zanpakuto, and there had been no use of any Shinigami skills. In all likelihood, this was simply a spiritually enhanced human, or one of those portable souls that Shinigami use when they need to inhabit mortal bodies. And while there's a chance I caught Kurosaki Ichigo before he could exit his body, there's no reason why he wouldn't do so now, Zamari reasoned. I came here to avenge Aizen-sama, but he has the arrogance to not even be here. He carefully looked around for his opponent. Did he truly run away? Zamari cursed that his Amor had been weakened so. Before he had been slain by that Quincy. Damn that boy. A single look upon the face of any foolish soul and an invisible burst of Amor would make them his slave, body and mind alike. But now, that power had been reduced to almost nothing. He required the use of his hands, and was limited to a mere 10 subjects instead of his previous 52. And even now, his control was not absolute. He could feel his prisoner struggling to break free, and Zamari had no control at all over the man's mouth and throat. Hey, heads up, Interrupted from his thoughts, Zamari turned around and was promptly smacked in the face by a soccer ball that exploded on impact, the ball's leather enveloping his face and thoroughly obscuring his vision. Shit, he swiftly moved Ishin to protect him from the front, anticipating an attack. Strangely, he felt no resistance from Ishin this time. Wait. Zamari felt a chill when he heard a voice from right behind him. Wrong way, Baka. He began to spin, but was promptly kicked hard, too hard for a normal human. Zamari was sent through the air and landed somewhere grassy. He managed to rip the leather off his face, but it was too late. In his distraction and inability to see, he was no longer pointing directly at Ishin. Which meant he was. Ishin sighed and sheathed Angetsu from where he'd promptly decapitated the Togabito. Both he and Khan watched as the body and head were pulled into a glowing red portal before the portal collapsed. Glad that's over, but did you have to blow up Karen's soccer ball? She's going to be upset. I needed a way to keep him from seeing me so I could get behind him. Khan retorted. Since I don't have a handy smokescreen attack, I used what was available. Ishin ruffled Khan's hair. I know. Good job, by the way. Khan froze for a second. It felt unexpectedly good to have Ichigo's father say that to him. But even so, he'd fought a sentient being, directly participated in causing its demise, even if it wasn't permanent. And that made him feel rather sick. Ishin. What is it? How do you deal with? Khan gestured where Zamari had been. Killing things. I mean, I know it was needed. Kami knows what would have happened to you and Karen if he'd been allowed to live, but... Ishin's expression softened. Let's go inside for this talk. After they re-entered the Kurosaki household, Khan sat down on the couch while Ishin went to tell Karen that they were safe for the moment. A few moments later, Ishin came down and sighed, sitting in a chair. Khan, Ichigo told me about your feelings regarding life. It's a respectable outlook. Khan merely nodded. He didn't want anything to die. After all that time being afraid of his own death, stuck in pill form directly after the Mod Soul production ceased and terrified that he would be found and destroyed, he couldn't stand the idea of letting anything die, let alone being directly involved in it. He didn't mind helping a bit with hollows, That wasn't really killing them, that was purifying and sending them to Soul Society, just making them stop being monsters. But, Zamari, he wasn't a hollow. And he looked all too human. The problem, Khan, is that we don't really have a choice, Ishin said heavily. You know what they are. Togabito, with the power to open and close portals to hell at whim. We don't have a way to detain them, so the only choice is to eliminate them as a threat. That means killing them, even if they come back later. I know all that, the mod soul replied, poking at the side of his own head. Up here. But, it hurts here. He tapped at his heart. How do Shinigami and humans deal with this? Knowing that they played a part in the death of another being. Isn't life sacred? Ishin grimaced. It depends on the person. Shinigami don't really deal with it very often, as our main task is to cleanse hollows. But when a good man does have to kill, he sighed. We usually have to rationalize it. Dehumanize the enemy, make them different from us. Tell ourselves over and over again why it has to be done. Understand that you don't want to, but it's for a greater good. Anything to shift the blame off you. He shook his head. You can make your body strong. You can make your spirit resilient. But your heart and mind, they are so fragile. Look at Ichigo. He's very strong now, right? Khan nodded, and Ishin continued. He took Aizen's life. He did it to save everyone, but he has nightmares so frequently these days because his mind rebels against the idea that he killed someone. His whole life, he has fought only to defend himself and others. And while he's put people in the hospital before, no one has ever died because he exerted his strength. Until now, I've no doubt that he's feeling horror that he actually did it, and sorrow and guilt for not thinking of a way to subdue Aizen without killing him, and anger that Aizen forced his hand. Ichigo is in a very fragile state right now, he hasn't had the time to mourn and begin to move on. And I worry for him, because as terrible as it is to take a life, he will be forced to do so much more than that in this war against hell. Ichigo looked at Hakken in disbelief, unable to process what he'd just heard. If Quincy arrows sent souls directly to hell, then all of those hollows that Ryu had killed, no. No way. Don't believe me, Hakken smiled knowingly, you'll see. How could that be true? Ichigo demanded. What connection could your arrows possibly have to hell? That's a long story that you don't have time for, the Quincy Togabito reminded with an insane smile. But then, his face grew a little more focused, a little more rational. But tell me, are there any Quincy remaining among the living? Ichigo nodded. Yes, a friend of mine, Ishida Ryu. Ishida, Hakken murmured, and the madness that decorated his expression faded further. Is there yet a chance? Then I'll let you go. Save your mother, but in return, save my descendants. Somewhere in the living world, there is a spiritual contract. It'll be hidden, only a Quincy can find it. Find it, and all your questions will be answered. Now go. Ichigo blinked, but decided that it was probably best to take advantage of his good fortune. He turned on his heel and Shunpo-ed down, directly behind the two Togabito who were attacking Cazador. A moment later, he stabbed the sword wielder in the back with the black Zangetsu, while Cazador took advantage of the opportunity to shove his own blade into the Togabito with the war hammer. What happened over there, King? I'm not entirely sure, but the Quincy won't bother us. Come back in. Cazador nodded reluctantly, and dissipated into Reishi before returning to Ichigo's heart. I'll get Zangetsu to fill me in. Let's go get her out of here. Damn right. Ichigo Shunpo-ed over to Shuren, who appeared to be sweating heavily and struggling with something. What's wrong? It's being difficult, Shuren grunted. I don't understand. Then perhaps I can enlighten you. Ichigo and Shuren froze, and as one turned around, Hell was right there, standing casually only a few meters away. Hell-sama, Shuren murmured, falling to one knee immediately. Hell ignored him. Kurosaki Ichigo, or is it Cazador de la Luna? The wizard shifted stance warily. I'm Ichigo. Of course you are. Your sister told me all about you. You defeated Aizen Sosuke, was it? Hell asked curiously. Ichigo nodded slowly, trying to get a measure for Hell's Reiatsu. Then the truth and horror began to dawn on him. For all of Ichigo's evolutions, he still couldn't sense Hell at all. Can't say I'm familiar with the name, Hell told Ichigo nonchalantly. Then again, if he started as a Shinigami, I wouldn't be anyway. But maybe you can tell me more. How strong was he? He smiled. And how strong are you? Ichigo tightened his grip on Zangetsu. There was no one else in Soul Society who could stand against him, in the end. I suppose if the Ryo had gotten involved, then. Hell laughed. The Ryo. He doesn't get involved unless he has to. Kurosaki Ichigo. He would have sent his royal guard. So, none of the Gote 13 could stand against him. Not even Yamamoto. How do you know of the Gote 13? Ichigo asked. Hell's smile grew. I have my ways. But allow me to get to the point. I want you on my side, Kurosaki Ichigo. Yuzu told me as much, Ichigo replied. I figured she would after I felt my connection to her slip. After all, as much as I would like to be able to hold on to a living soul, my chains are simply no match to a living soul's chain of fate. No matter. Hell sighed and glanced at Shuren. I might have known you would try this, Shuren-kun. Such resentment and greed, no wonder you have grown strong here. But you'd do just about anything to be free of my chains, wouldn't you? Very well. Shuren's face shot up to stare at Hell in slight disbelief and hope. Hell made a simple gesture, and the chains binding the Togabito fell away to the sand before dissipating. I'm free. Hell laughed again, far darker than before. In a sense, in an instant, he was beside Shuren, his hand on top of the ex-Togabito's skull. Free of the chains, yes. Free of me, never. He clenched his hand into a fist, crushing Shuren's head to pulp. The corpse fell messily to the ground, before dissolving into sand and being blown away into the desert. Ichigo stared on in horror. So fast. Hell flicked his hand out to the desert, the remaining bits of flesh between his fingers too dissolving into sand and being carelessly banished away. No doubt you wondered why he could not resurrect your mother, Hell commented carelessly. There is a very simple reason for that. Resurrection cycles here are based on how much power that soul has. Kurosaki Masaki had no true spiritual power of her own, and she lacked the hatred, resentment, anger and fear to benefit from being a Togabito. Shuren was fighting against the tide, essentially, and simply didn't have enough power to call her out. Ichigo swallowed, his mouth dry. I know you told Cazador that you would require a pure soul in trade for her. But will you resurrect her? Certainly. Hell turned towards the lava pool. Come forth, Kurosaki Masaki. The lava rushed upwards in a pillar for a moment, before the nude form of Ichigo's mother fell out and collapsed just outside the pool. Hell made a dismissive gesture, and she was instantly clothed in an elegant red kimono. Ichigo made to rush towards her, but Hell was instantly in the way. No, Ichigo-kun. I said I would resurrect her. I did not say I would give her to you. Her soul is mine, unless you have that pure soul for trade. Ichigo grit his teeth. I do not. That's a shame. Because, you see, Hell lifted his hand, materializing Masaki's chain effortlessly and lifting her off the ground. Right now, she is useless to me. Perhaps I should scatter her to the desert as well. No. Ichigo lunged for the creator of this dimension, both Zangetsu blazing with the light of a Getsuga Tensho. But just as he was about to strike, Hell was no longer there. Oh, you wish to fight me for her? Hell smiled. Very well then. He dropped Masaki to the ground, and in his right hand generated a simple-looking sword. Go, Masaki gasped out. Stay there, Mom. I'm coming for you. Ichigo briefly considered releasing his seals, but decided against it. With his seals off, he would be largely unable to touch his mother, and he was hoping for a chance to grab her and get away. But aside from that, I'm going to need every bit of power for this. I should finish it quickly. Flaring his Reiatsu violently around him, Ichigo thrust both Zangetsu in front of him. Bankai. Emerging from the smoke with his Ijuka's mask on, the vizard began to flicker in and out of Shunpo, circling Hell so quickly that he had several afterimages at any given moment. Getsuga. He materialized directly behind Hell and struck with both blades simultaneously in opposite directions, left and right horizontally. Tensho. Black and white met, raging Getsuga's blinding Ichigo to whether or not Hell was injured. But Ichigo leapt back regardless, pointing the white Tensa Zangetsu at Hell. A crimson Sero began to charge at its tip. Sero. Ichigo sustained the beam as long as he could, the power behind it kicking up sand and creating a smoke cover that enshrouded hell. Again, Sero. Again, Sero. Again, Sero. Ichigo screamed. Where are you pointing at? Ichigo's eyes went wide. He spun and leapt away to defend, too late. Hell's sword cut off his left arm at the shoulder. He grit his teeth in pain, but began shunted an enormous amount of power towards the wound. His wound regenerated almost instantly, and with a twist of his wrist, the white Tensa Zangetsu leapt out of his old hand and into the newly regenerated one. The sleeve of his Bankai, however, did not grow back to cover his arm, leaving it bare. Hell dropped his sword and applauded slowly, evidently unharmed from the onslaught. Powerful, very powerful in fact, and unafraid of using both Shinigami and Hollow abilities. Excellent, but not strong enough. Why don't you utilize your Resurrection? Because the air here makes me lose control when I do, Ichigo retorted. Ah, Hell replied in realization, as if he'd honestly not known. So that's the effect my Reiatsu has on you. What a pity, I would have liked to take you on at full power. But no matter, I have what I want. What? And then Ichigo fell to his knees as he felt something materialize on his chest. Chains. His eyes widened in horror, the horrific dream he'd had coming to the fore. No, no, attached to his chest were the chains of hell. How? He gasped, his mask crumbling in his shock. Don't tell me you didn't already know, Hell chided, materializing the other end of Ichigo's chain in his hand. You may not have died, but you willingly took my power into yourself. After that, I just needed the connection to be strong enough. I needed your rage, your resentment, your hate, your desperation. So I brought out your mother and goaded you into fighting me with everything you could. That was more than enough. You belong to me now. Ichigo stabbed the white Tensa Zangetsu into the ground, using it for stability as he slowly stood up. No. What? For the first time, Hell looked surprised. I do not belong to you, Ichigo roared, straightening up as his power raged around him, black as a Getsuga. His mask reformed over the left side of his face, leaving his right untouched. The chains attached to his chest rattled under the weight of his Reiatsu, and his eyes, once more the mismatched set of Ichigo's own brown and Cazador's amber, glowed with his resolve. This parasite inside me, this damned fragment of your ugly power, I reject it. Suddenly, something in Ichigo's heart twisted in terrible, soul-wrenching pain before Hell Ichigo erupted from Ichigo's chest, taking the chains of hell with him. He turned around, his face a mask of disbelief. Ichigo, what have you done? Hell blinked, before he began to laugh again, heartily. Oh, now this is interesting. Very well, Kurosaki Ichigo. Your mother will live for now. Until next time. A portal opened directly behind Ichigo without warning, and he found himself falling through it. Crashing on the ground outside of Urahara's shop with both Tensa Zangetsu on either side of him, Ichigo spun around and tried to dive back in, but to no avail. The portal had already almost finished closing, and the last thing he saw was his mother's tear-streaked face. Damn it, damn it, damn it, he cried, punching the ground. Mom, why couldn't I save you? Ichigo. The wizard didn't bother to look up. He knew it was Urahara. I couldn't save her. All my power was nothing. He punched the street again, and his fist came up bloody. Hell has her, and I couldn't even touch him. Then you'll train until you can, Urahara said simply. How, Urahara? The same way as you did in the Dongai. Against another opponent you can't touch. Ichigo froze and turned around. There was the spirit of his Bankai, and beside him was his inner hollow. The mask fragment crumbled away again, once more revealing Ichigo's entire face. Tensa Zangetsu. I will not have my wielder succumb to despair, Ichigo, Tensa Zangetsu angrily reminded him. Abandon your fear, and I will always help you protect those precious to you. Look forward, King. So what if Hell makes it more difficult to use Resurrection without losing yourself? Cazador demanded. Practice it without my help until you can stand against the instinct alone. Move forward and never stop. There is always a way, Ichigo. You will only age if you pull back, and the task will become that much more difficult. And once you see that chance to win, don't you dare hesitate, or you will die. Ichigo nodded, thoroughly chastened. With their piece said, the avatars of Ichigo's power dematerialized and returned to Ichigo's inner world. Looking back at Urahara, Ichigo found the inventor looking rather interested. Did they come out on their own that time? The shopkeeper asked. Yeah, why? Urahara smiled. That's rather unusual, Ichigo. Bankai spirits don't usually materialize themselves. Shikai spirits do occasionally, but Bankai spirits. He shook his head. You grow ever more interesting, Ichigo. Ichigo sighed, and then a thought occurred to him. Hey, is everyone alright? Hell sent a few people, right? That's correct, but everyone is fine. A few scrapes, but no one was seriously hurt, Urahara reported. Although there's a certain Ichi-ni. Never mind, Urahara finished with a smile, watching as Yuzu tackled her older brother. Ichi-ni, are you okay? Yuzu asked, checking him for injuries as though she didn't trust him to tell the truth. She probably doesn't, the wizard had to admit. I'm fine, Yuzu. Ichigo grimaced and looked away. But I wasn't able to save Mom. Yuzu stiffened, but relaxed a moment later. Then you'll just have to save her next time, she finally said quietly several seconds later. After all, my brother is too stubborn to give up, even when he probably should. Her words pierced right through the wall he'd built up around his emotions, and his eyes began to sparkle with unshed tears. A half-laughing, half-sobbing sound choked out of Ichigo's throat as he wiped his eyes with his left hand. He pulled Yuzu into a hug with his right. Yeah, Yuzu, I'm kinda dumb like that. Let's get you home to Karen and Dad. When you're done there, come on back, Urahara ordered. We have things to discuss. Nodding, Ichigo reverted to Shikai and dismissed the white blade he'd won from his hollow. Sheathing Zangetsu on his back, Ichigo picked up Yuzu and held her against his chest. You ready? Yuzu nodded. A second later, she felt the air crushing her against her older brother, and then a few seconds later it was over. Ichigo set her down, and she realized that they were just outside of the Kurosaki home. You're really fast, Ichi-ni. Not fast enough, Ichigo muttered. Ow, he rubbed his leg where his little sister had smacked it. What was that for? No beating yourself up, Yuzu commanded. You'll get Mom next time. The door to their home flung open unexpectedly. Yuzu. Ichigo swore that Karen must have used Shunpo or something, because 1 second she was at the door, and the next instant she'd tackled her twin and was holding her as tightly as possible. Karen, I need to breathe, Yuzu complained even as she hugged her sister back almost as tightly. Then Karen let go and looked directly into Yuzu's eyes. Don't you scare me like that again. I'll try, Yuzu promised. Ichigo couldn't help but smile seeing the reunion. Feeling eyes upon him, he saw Isshin at the door where Karen had been. Meeting his father's gaze, Ichigo slowly shook his head in the negative. Isshin slumped momentarily, before straightening. When their eyes met again, both of them could see the determination burning darkly in the other. We will save Mom. Yes, son, we will. They were Kurosaki. They would protect, no matter what it takes. As soon as Ichigo re-entered the Urahara shop, the shopkeeper almost dragged him to the Seraiti communications room, where he'd talked to Byakuya not long ago. It seemed that all of the Taicho in Soul Society were present on their end, while the Living World team minus the Wizard-turned-Arankar and Tosen was on the other. Yamamoto banged his cane. Hitsugaya Taicho. Report. The diminutive white-haired Shinigami nodded solemnly. Hell sent a multi-pronged strike force to the Living World today. Sato Yasutora successfully defeated a Togabito at the school. Ishida Ryu and Inoue Orihime defeated another in the woods nearby. Kurosaki Isshin, who is not present due to the needs of protecting his family, defeated a third outside the Kurosaki residence. Kurosaki Ichigo met with a fourth directly outside of the Urahara shop. The ex-Taicho and ex-Fukuteicho who make up the Wizard, with the exception of Hachigen, are currently training to explore their Resurrection abilities. Tosen is still performing Jinzen. Kurosaki Ichigo. Yamamoto's attention turned to the Wizard in question. Report. You could ask nicely, Ichigo muttered mutinously under his breath, but sighed. The Togabito who appeared was Shuren, one of the Togabito who had kidnapped my sisters. I fought him, until he offered a deal. He wanted to be free of hell, and in return he would help remove the chains of hell from my sister and mother. I agreed. Why? Several reasons. My family is most important to me, and I couldn't imagine getting a better opportunity to get willing help from a Togabito. It would also definitively test if I could destroy their chains now that Hell has returned to power. Finally, it would deprive Hell of a capable fighter capable of taking on my masked Bankai, Ichigo explained. My machines indicate you entered the Hell dimension at this point, Mayuri commented. Not quite. Shuren did open the portal, but the exposure to Hell's air made my sister, Yuzu, come back to life. I cut her chain, and she is now a normal human again, Ichigo corrected. My mother, however, died completely and her soul was taken back to Hell. After that, we entered Hell. Were you successful in resurrecting Masaki? Yamamoto queried emotionlessly. Yes and no. Hell arrived and destroyed Shuren entirely. He resurrected Masaki using the lava pool, but refused to give her up. I fought Hell, trying to beat him down long enough to take Masaki and run. He beat me. Are you a Togabito now? Again, yes and no. Ichigo was prepared for the uproar from everyone, and weathered it stoically. How did this happen? Yamamoto demanded. During my first incursion to Hell, in an effort to reduce Hell's impact on my hollow side, I battled a manifestation of the effects within my inner world. Ichigo explained. I rejected its power, and it dissipated within my inner world, so I thought nothing of it. Apparently I did not get rid of Hell's Reiatsu entirely, and it coalesced into a, for lack of a better description, inner Togabito. However, this time, Hell sensed that presence and tried to use it to control me. He manifested the chains of Hell on me. But I expelled the inner Togabito from my soul, and doing so removed the chains from me. He now resides in Hell. So if you see someone who looks like me, with red eyes and darker hair and chains, that's him. Ichigo's voice grew even more serious. If he appears, be very careful. I have no way of knowing whether he has all the abilities I do. Is there anything else of note? Ichigo silently sent an apology to his friend. I encountered a Quincy in Hell. Who? Ishida asked. Ishida Haken. We should have expected this, Yukitaki murmured. So it's even more dangerous than we thought, then. Yes, but not for the reasons you think, Ichigo interrupted. Haken told me the truth regarding Quincy arrows. What truth? Ishida demanded. What don't I know about my own power? Ishida, your arrows don't destroy souls, the Transcendent told him bluntly. Those souls go straight to Hell. Do not pass Soul Society. Do not collect purification. What? Ishida turned to Ichigo in disbelief. You can't be serious. The boy is correct. The Quincy slowly turned to the viewing screen, where Mayuri had spoken. And you knew. Of course I knew, idiot. Mayuri spat. I am a scientist. After all those experiments I performed on the Quincy, how could I not know? Then why? Ishida asked quietly, his voice slowly rising. Why were we told that we were destroying the balance? Why were my people murdered? Why did the war even happen? The Quincy were in fact disrupting the balance, Yamamoto decreed, cutting off Ishida. Simply not for the reasons you think. It is true that Quincy arrows do not destroy souls. But Hell does not release souls so easily. If a Shinigami or plus soul dies, it returns to the living world for reincarnation. If a hollow dies, it is purified and sent on to Soul Society or Hell, depending on the actions taken in life. But when a Togabito dies, it simply returns to Hell endlessly. There is no return to the normal cycle of reincarnation. With the Quincy sending every soul they slew to Hell directly, the Hell dimension grew larger and heavier compared to the other dimensions. If it had continued, Hell would have consumed the living world entirely before moving on to Soul Society and Hueco Mundo. In addition, with every soul that was sent straight to Hell, the chances of Hell finding a being with sufficient power to resurrect even a fragment of its former self increased. As you are aware, knowledge of the true nature of Hell was strictly forbidden, even to the Taicho. So it could not be revealed to mortals that they were potentially recreating an apocalypse by that method. The decision was made to exaggerate the problem slightly. It was thought that the Quincy would be more inclined to cease their activities if they believed that they were destroying souls entirely. After all, the sanctity of human life was one of the most used arguments the Quincy had used to argue for their powers. Surely, we thought, that would extend to the human soul. The rest, you are already aware of, Yamamoto finished. Ishida's glasses flashed. Do you know why our powers send souls to hell, then? Actually, Haken mentioned some sort of spiritual contract Ichigo offered. He said something about only a Quincy being able to get to it, and that it would explain everything. Fine, looks like I know what I'll be doing for the foreseeable future, Ishida replied bitterly, storming out. Uryu. The quiet until now Inoue called out, following him outside. Ichigo sighed. That could have gone better. How about from your end? He asked. I understand that you're creating a team to capture a Togabito for study. How's that going? The Taicho that Ichigo didn't recognize stepped forward. You must be Kurosaki Ichigo. I am Amagai Shusuke, the new Taicho of the 5th Division, and the leader of the team you mentioned. The training has only just begun, and I anticipate it being another week or so of training before they are ready to go the living world. Ichigo nodded. Thanks for the update, Byakuya. Any news on that thing we discussed? All eyes turned to the 6th Division Taicho. I have arranged a meeting, Kurosaki. I assure you, you will be alerted as soon as I have pertinent information. Everyone up to date then? Urahara asked after a moment of silence. Excellent. Then allow me to explain what Mayuri and I have accomplished. While it is more or less impossible to completely prevent hell from invading, we have managed to make great progress on hindering Togabito from crossing into the living world. As everyone here is already well aware, the Dongai exists between Soul Society and the living world. Mayuri picked up where his predecessor left off. The Koryu and Kotatsu serve nicely as an active defense against unwanted intruders. Urahara sat at a nearby console and typed quickly, creating an illustration for everyone to see. See, here is the current layout of dimensions. Hell, the living world, the Dongai, and Soul Society. He quickly created labels for each world as he called them out. Where is Hueco Mundo on this? Ichigo asked, curious. He'd never gotten such a concise, clear display of where everything stood before. Urahara clacked a few more keys, and a model for Hueco Mundo appeared slightly adjacent to the Dongai. There we are. Huh, Hueco Mundo is closer to Hell than Soul Society is, Ichigo observed. In fact, it's about as close as the living world is. Of course it is, idiot, Mayuri insulted. Only freshly dead souls and hollows have the capacity of being sent to Hell upon purification. It's obvious that Hell would remain relatively close to the dimensions that retain large quantities of each. Not my point, Ichigo argued. Hell is closer than usual to the living world, right? So did Hell move closer to Hueco Mundo as well? Because it looks to me like even if we manage to make it difficult for Hell to come straight to the living world, there's nothing preventing Hell from taking over Hueco Mundo and coming in through that route. Startled, Urahara typed furiously at his computer before whirling around to face the wizard. Have you ever considered a career in the military? You've got a good eye for on-the-spot analysis of defensive weaknesses. Wait, the fool is correct, Mayuri demanded disbelievingly. Apparently, Urahara replied carelessly. But if the fool is correct, then who was truly the fool? Enough, Yamamoto declared. It would seem that Hueco Mundo will need to be protected as well. We will address that shortly. Urahara, Kuritsuchi Taicho, continue. Right then, the shopkeeper began with a cheerful smile. The whole idea is to shift and stretch the Dongai a bit. Sort of wedge it in between the living world and Hell, so to speak. With any luck, the Dongai's defenses, the Koryu and Kotatsu, will hinder the Togabito. At the very least, it will prove more difficult for Togabito to simply rip holes from Hell to the living world. What are the downsides? Chad asked, speaking up for the first time this meeting. There are a few big ones, Urahara admitted. It's difficult to move a dimension, it will take time and effort. It will also render the living world mostly cut off from Soul Society until the dimension stabilizes enough to work through. Even then, it would be extremely unsafe, as the Kotatsu must be almost constantly active. It's not perfect, Mayuri admitted reluctantly, but there are tactical advantages as well. Using the Dongai in this way will allow Soul Society easier access to Hell directly, by taking advantage of our Jigokucho. We will, of course, need to shield the Dongai similarly to the living world in order to maximize its defensive capabilities. Yamamoto's frown grew slightly darker. This would create a connection, albeit indirect, to Soul Society from Hell, correct? Yes, Urahara conceded. However, Between the Dongai's natural defenses, plus the shielding against hell, it would make it very difficult to get through. And even if they did, they'd have the Gote 13 to fight against on their own turf. And, recent incidents notwithstanding, that's quite a formidable force. Everyone was silent, watching the Sotaicho come to a decision. Finally, he nodded. Make it so. Hi, Urahara and Mayuri accepted in unison, before the latter glared at the former. Urahara merely smiled. Ignoring their antics, Yamamoto turned his attention back to Ichigo. As you pointed out, Hueco Mundo is a point of weakness against Hell. We do not currently know whether Hell has begun his invasion there. However, the fact remains that the Hollows and Arrancar that reside there must be made ready. You have made allies of them before. Are you prepared to do so again? Ichigo gave a sharp nod. Of course, I'll go tonight. Do not go alone, Yamamoto half warned, half commanded. Allies are not, they are hollow by nature, and you are a very strong soul. Take a contingent of your wizard allies with you. The Transcendent merely nodded, carefully keeping his status as king of Hueco Mundo quiet. It was a good idea to bring some of the wizard with him regardless. Hueco Mundo provided a nice empty landscape for practicing some of the more destructive hollow techniques. Sero, for instance, or for Shinigami and Hollow to battle for control of their body. King, that reminded him, hey, were you able to arrange that meeting with the Ryo? Ichigo asked. Yamamoto shook his head in the negative. Not yet. The request has been made, but it may be a few more days before I hear word back. The Transcendent frowned. Do you think he'll help? The Sotaicho eyed the Kurosaki boy appraising Ly. Number. Not directly, in any case. Before Ichigo could react to this, Urahara jumped in. The Ryo may or may not provide the method that was used to defeat Hell originally, but remember that he and the Zero Division are largely separated from Soul Society and its affairs. They typically only step in when the Gote 13 has proven itself unable to handle a situation that affects the Ryo in some manner. That very reason is why the Zero Division is also called the Royal Guard, Yamamoto agreed. Their purpose is to protect the Ryo, and the Ryo has specialty duties that he must attend to, or Soul Society would be rent asunder. The Gote 13 and Central 46 exist to handle the affairs of Soul Society, and by extension, the other worlds. Ichigo scowled, but accepted the reason with a nod. After a few moments where nothing was said, Yamamoto struck the floor with his cane again. Very well, we shall speak again soon. Keep me updated on any further developments. And with that, the view screen turned off. Ichigo turned on his heel and began heading to the basement. He had a dimension to get to, and some wizard turned Arrancar to drag with him. Chapter 58. Assessment. Who are ya gonna take with ya? Hollow Shinji asked curiously. Ichigo had just explained the situation to them all, and almost all of the Arrancar were eager to go to Hueco Mundo, curious what effect the dimension would have on their powers. Ichigo sighed. To be honest, I don't know. On the one hand, I want to leave the strongest wizard here in case things go pear-shaped while I'm gone. But at the same time, I need people strong enough and smart enough to be able to take charge of groups of Ijukas and Vasto Lord Hollows and Arrancar, which means that I would prefer to take one of the ex-Taicho just because of their experience and the ability to use Bankai if needed. But we can't use Bankai and Resurrection together until either we or our inner Shinigami manages to wrest it from the other, Kensai pointed out. That's kind of the point, Ichigo retorted. The desert in Hueco Mundo would be empty enough for you to have your fight. No matter what Yamamoto says, whoever I take with me is primarily going to be training to be able to use their Zanpakuto and Resurrection simultaneously. I can take care of myself, and there are plenty of powerful hollows, so I'm thinking no more than 3 people should come along for the training. Any volunteers? You've got a good point, Love agreed. But like you said, you've a need for at least one ex-Taicho, I think I should go. He hefted Tengumaru pointedly. Seeing as it was a gigantic spiked Kanabo, Ichigo quickly assented. I'm coming, Hiyori asserted, glaring at Ichigo as if daring him to disagree. Rolling his eyes, Ichigo merely nodded. Doesn't matter if it's Hollow her or Shinigami her, they're exactly the same. I would come along, if you'll have me, Lisa spoke up unexpectedly. Of course, the wizard agreed, though he was slightly confused. Lisa as a wizard had been extremely distant from Ichigo the entire time he'd known her. Hollow Lisa was even worse, and almost seemed to prefer being alone despite the company of those like her. Well then, Shinji said loudly, clapping his hands together as he grinned. Sounds like you have your three. Get outta here. Ichigo nodded. Not bothering to summon his mask, he called the traces of hollow power that existed in his base form and opened a garganta. He and his team stepped inside without hesitation. A short trip later, they stepped out into the vast desert expanse of Hueco Mundo, right in front of the doors to Las Noches. The doors themselves were enormous, and white just like the rest of the palace exterior. Despite that, the doors had an intricate design that must have taken a while to craft. Stay close, Ichigo ordered calmly as he felt a wave of hollow Reiatsu wash over him. With a single hand, he pushed open an enormous door and walked in. Hello, and welcome to Las Noches, a very familiar voice greeted. Is there anything I can help you with, Ichigo-sama? Peshi, Dondo-chaka, Ichigo asked disbelievingly. Ichigo-sama, the pair of the Frashon immediately bowed deeply in front of him. My liege, what can I do for you and your guests? Peshi asked deferentially. Ichigo grimaced and pointedly ignored the questioning looks from his comrades. I need to see Nell and Ulquiorra immediately. At once, sir. Dondo-chaka, right. The heavy-set Arrancar ran off, presumably to fetch the ex-espada in question. Ichigo-sama, please follow me to the meeting room, Peshi requested. Nodding, Ichigo began to follow the strangely formal Arrancar. You don't have to treat me like I'm some visiting royalty or anything. Immediately after saying this, Ichigo regretted it, because he knew what was coming. But you are, Peshi protested. You're Kurosaki Ichigo, king of Hueco Mundo. King, Ichigo's companions chorused. When did this happen? Hiyori demanded. It was a very recent development, Peshi answered easily. But after Aizen died, Ichigo-sama came back to Hueco Mundo and proved that he was stronger than everyone else, even the other Vasto Lord-class hollows. So he became king. Lisa looked up at Ichigo. You didn't need us, she observed. No, Ichigo admitted. I brought you along so you all could get stronger. And to keep Yamamoto off my back. I don't need to tell you that I'd prefer to keep this a secret. Ichigo received a chorus of nods in return. That much was self-evident to the Vizard-turned-Arrancar. In a more literal sense than most, the Vizard were such because Soul Society had attempted to execute them for having hollow powers thrust upon them. If Ichigo were to be revealed as the ruler of all hollows. Ichigo. The Transcendent turned to the sound and allowed a half-smile to cross his face. Nell. The gentle Arrancar smiled back. Stark was a few feet behind her, along with Lillinet. They nodded at him, and he nodded back in acknowledgement. Then Stark frowned. Kurosaki-sama, what has happened? Your soul feels incomplete. Something is missing. Lillinet frowned and peered at him critically. Hey, yeah, that's right. What did you do? Ichigo blinked. How can you tell? The former Primera gestured at himself and his Frashon. Lillinet and I are two parts of the same soul, and one of our Resurrection powers is splitting our soul further. It's easy for us to tell when someone else has done the same. Ichigo frowned. He hadn't been quite sure if his Togabito reflection had been part of him, or was an invasive soul fragment of hell. Guess this answers that, but that meant very disturbing things for his own psyche that he'd have to meditate on later. I'll explain in a minute, when Ulquiorra is here. Kurosaki Ichigo. Speak of the devil, Stark commented lightly. And guessed, it would seem. Ulquiorra had indeed entered the room, Tia Harabel walking slightly behind. Harabel. Nell greeted. It's good to see you. Ulquiorra. Harabel. Ichigo acknowledged. What brings you back to Hueco Mundo? Harabel asked quietly. And who have you brought with you? Let's sit down. This is a bit of a long story. Peshi fetched some tea for everyone, and Ichigo filled in the former espada as best he could. Silence ruled for several moments, before Stark groaned. We're going to war again. Shut up. Harabel barked out, her eyes intensely focusing on Ichigo's own. You're sure? Quincy arrows send souls to hell. Positive, Ichigo confirmed. Then the next time you go, I'm coming with you, she asserted. My Frashon are there somewhere. Fine by me. The Vizard turned to Ulquiorra. Have any Togabito come here to Hueco Mundo? I cannot say. There has been some strange Reiatsu signatures appearing sporadically in Hueco Mundo, but it is gone quickly. I would normally assume that they are newborn Ijukas who are swiftly eaten by other, more experienced hollows, but I cannot be sure. Nodding, Ichigo stood. The Arrancar stood as well in deference to their king. We need to prepare for war. The Shinigami and my human friends are handling the living world, so it's up to us to protect Hueco Mundo. Ulquiorra, Stark, Harabel, I need you to spread the word amongst the other Vasto Lord and Ijuka's class hollows to keep an eye out for the Togabito. Las Noches is to be a safe haven, and any who wish to join us are welcome as long as they don't eat anyone else residing here. He turned to Neliel, who gazed upon him resolutely. Nell, I need you to stay here with your fraction. Have them ready some rooms for us, as we'll probably be in Hueco Mundo for a while. While they're doing that, I need you to train these three. He gestured at Hiyori, Love and Lisa. They're new to the Arrancar thing, and would no doubt benefit from your experience. Sure, but what about you, Ichigo? Nell asked quietly. Me, I'm going to find Grimmjow. Ishida Ryu sat down on the roof of his father's hospital with a sigh. It was the only place he could think of quiet enough for him to gather his thoughts. Spotting a simple folding chair nearby, Ishida raised an eyebrow. Apparently I'm not the only one who comes up here to think. Unfolding the chair, the Quincy sat and rubbed his temples. Quincy's don't destroy souls, after all. They send them to hell. There's some sort of spiritual contract involved. Grandfather Soken, did you know? Why did no one ever tell me? Shaking his head, Ishida struggled to set his feelings aside and analyze the data he'd been given. But there was so little to work from. In the end, it came down to two questions. Is there a physical contract somewhere? If so, where is the contract now? If Ishida could have a copy of the contract, that would be a place to start. If Ruken knew about the true nature of our powers, then he would have told me. It would have been one of his weapons to convince me to cease my spiritual activities, he reasoned. So, it follows that he probably does not know the whereabouts of the contract either. As we are the last of the living Quincy, that means I must do as Chad did. Ishida stood, now having a plan. He needed to go to Soul Society and seek out his ancestors. And then he remembered, he couldn't do that. Kuretsuchi Mayuri had dissected a rather large number of Quincy, including Ishida's grandfather. Even if there were any Quincy remaining in Soul Society, then they would not respond to any requests for meetings. Vaguely remembering the history lessons Soken had given him when he was much younger, Ishida knew that the Quincy had originated in Germany. As a result, it seemed very likely that the contract had taken place there. But Germany was too wide an area for him to search, and it was entirely possible that the contract had been moved since then. He needed to narrow down the location. Sitting again, Ishida grimaced. Much as he hated to admit it, it appeared that he would need to work with Mayuri. The man was a scientist, and he would no doubt have records of everything his prisoners had communicated. Among those records were bound to be mentions of the contract, and with any luck, clues to its location. Working with the man who'd orchestrated his grandfather's demise was galling to the extreme, but Ishida saw no other choice. Gritting his teeth, he stood up to go see him. Ryu. Ishida turned to the side, where he saw Inoue step down off her Santenkeshun, dissolving it back into her hairpins. Orihime. Are you okay? No. Ishida shook his head. No, I'm not. My powers send souls, innocent souls, to hell eternally. When I thought they destroyed the souls, I could live with it. It's only painful for a moment, I would tell myself. Wouldn't any decent soul rather die than be forced to commit atrocities, than have to kill their loved ones and eat other souls? I could justify it to myself, and I could deal with the consequences. But they don't cease to exist. Ishida spat out. They're sent to hell. They suffer, and they suffer, and they never, ever get release. All these years, I've been condemning those souls to a fate worse than death. But you couldn't have known, Inoue pointed out, coming closer. If you'd have known, you would have stopped, Ryu-kun. I'm sure of it. Would I? Ishida retorted disbelievingly. Let's say for a moment that I had. Then I wouldn't have dared to go to Soul Society to help rescue Kuchiki Rukia. I would never have found out that Kuretsuchi Mayuri was responsible for the death of my grandfather. He would have gone after another, perhaps even you, Orihime. Or let's assume that it would have ended alright even without me. Kuchiki is saved, and events continue to play out. I wouldn't have gone to Hueco Mundo to help rescue you. Kurosaki would have gone after Zamari, who would have caught him in his technique and forced Kurosaki to slit his own throat. You would have been Aizen's plaything again. Or how about after that? Ishida continued his rant, growing louder with every sentence. Without me, Kuchiki and Abarai would have died. Kuchiki wouldn't have been alive to help you reject Baragan, and he would have rotted everything. More would have perished. You would have died. Ishida took a deep, steadying breath. The truly damning thing about me, Orihime, is that even knowing now that my powers condemn souls to hell, I don't regret any of it. I know that if I hadn't acted, Aizen may have won, and then everyone would likely be dead anyway, sacrificed for the Okayan. But more than that, I would have done it all over again, if it meant that you and the rest of my friends stayed alive. Inoue's eyes were wide. But you're going to find that contract, right? And make it so your arrows don't do that. Of course I am. The Quincy sighed, suddenly tired. I don't want any more souls to suffer unnecessarily. Then I'll get stronger too, Inoue promised. Strong enough to reject hell's hold over all those souls. We'll make it right, together. Ishida nodded sharply and turned away. Come on, Orihime, we should head back. He leapt into the air and used his Harenkyaku to dash away, glad she could no longer see his face. He did not want her to see the effect her words had had on him. Inoue followed on her Santen Keshun, never noticing how the air occasionally glistened. But the sharp-eyed man who stepped out of the shadows on the roof saw, and watched the wind ferry his son's silent tears to the ground. Yamamoto sat alone in his office, contemplating the events that had led to this point. While he was confident that hell would, eventually, be neutralized, he knew that there was every chance he might not survive long enough to see it. So, he needed to correct what he could, and do his best to prepare Shunsui for his future role as Sotaicho. But in order to determine the future, he needed to understand the mistakes of the past. Where did it all go wrong? Yamamoto pondered the question for a time. Such a question could have a myriad of answers, all equally correct depending on the perspective of he who answered. The Central 46 would likely condemn Kurosaki Ichigo for awakening hell, and indeed he had. However, he had done so accidentally, while trying to save his family. Only a man without a heart could fail to understand, and despite Kurosaki's recent accusations, even Yamamoto's heart could ache in sympathetic pain. Those who saw a bit more of the bigger picture, perhaps, would blame the Gote 13 for not promptly assassinating Kurosaki after Aizen was finished. Surely, they would think, the Gote had enough power to take down one human being, no matter how strong. And that too was true. If the Gote 13 had followed protocol, killing or binding Kurosaki was the prudent and natural course of action. The living should never have the powers of the dead. But not only would that be difficult, how would it not be, after Kurosaki had gained such power? But it flew in the face of morality. Kurosaki had sacrificed much in order to gain the strength he needed, and if not for him then Aizen would have won. Soul Society owed him a debt, and it was possible his strength would be needed in the future. Besides, humans led such short lives. By allowing Kurosaki to keep his powers, he would grow up with the Gote 13 and naturally join them upon his inevitable death. Either of those answers were true in their own way, but it was clear they were not analyzing deeply enough. In Yamamoto's opinion, the problems had begun the minute they believed the word of a single, charismatic Fukuteicho whose powers were not fully known, over that of not only one, but two Taicho. If the Central 46 had simply allowed Urahara and Tessai to defend and explain their actions, perhaps even alongside the hollowified Shinigami that now called themselves the Vizard, then Aizen's treachery would have been revealed early. They would have been able to defeat him, and the Gote would have recovered long before Kurosaki Ichigo had been born. If they had been able to retain the Vizard, then the Gote 13 would have been even stronger for it. But those decisions had been purely those of the Central 46. There had been nothing Yamamoto could do about that. A new Central 46 had been determined, and with any luck they would learn from the mistakes of their predecessors. So far, they seemed a reasonable sort, if their decision regarding allowing Zangetsu and Kuchiki Taicho access to their library were any marker to go by. Yamamoto furrowed his brow. The next events of significance had been orchestrated by Aizen himself, Kurosaki Masaki had been eaten by the Grand Fisher, Kuchiki Rukia had been sentenced to execution via Sokyoku, and Kurosaki Ichigo had invaded with his band of Ryoka. The latter events had been made possible purely because the Central 46 were so secretive that no one was permitted to see them unless summoned or if it was an emergency. That, he could do something about. He would talk to the Central 46 and make a suggestion that they rotate guards, using high-ranking members of the Gote 13. In doing so, Soul Society might avoid having a traitor speak with the voice of the Central 46 again. That decision made, Yamamoto renewed his focus on evaluating the past. The next event was the decision to allow Kurosaki Ichigo to live. At the time, it had seemed wise to do so. Kurosaki was extremely strong, a Taicho-class Shinigami who had never seen Aizen's Shikai. He was to be the final trump card. In the end, that decision was vindicated in that Kurosaki succeeded in killing Aizen. However, in the process of doing so, Kurosaki had grown strong enough that some wondered who was stronger, Yamamoto or Kurosaki. And that, Yamamoto told himself with a heavy sigh, is where it all started to go wrong. While he still felt he was right to take precautionary measures in case Kurosaki went mad with power as far too many did, Yamamoto had made the same mistake that Hiroko Shinji had made when he was Aizen's Taicho. He'd distanced himself, and never came to actually know the person. If Hiroko had grown closer, he would have detected Aizen's treachery sooner. If Yamamoto had allowed himself to get to know Kurosaki, then he would have been relieved to find that Kurosaki was still quite sane and merely wanted peace. Yamamoto would have been in a far better position to explain about Hell, and they could, perhaps, have sent a team who would not have accidentally awakened Hell. Perhaps, Yamamoto had to admit, Shunsui had the right of it. To his prodigal student, the point of critical failure had been Yamamoto himself, by not treating Kurosaki Ichigo as an equal and underestimating how far the boy would go for his family. Kurosaki was not a member of the Gote 13, and treating him like one of Yamamoto's soldiers was not only useless but counterproductive. Failing to see that was a mistake whose blame lay squarely on the ancient shoulders of Yamamoto. Kurosaki had always valued his nakama more than rules, more than law, more than tradition. It would of course follow that he would always rebel against anything that restricted his ability to protect them. But by the same token, he would always aid those who helped him in turn. Yamamoto had seen Kurosaki's eyes when they had been speaking over the trans-dimensional communications monitor. He could see that Kurosaki only tolerated him now because he was needed, and would much prefer they never had anything to do with one another again. While it was not hate, it was certainly an intense dislike combined with wariness. Just another reason for me to retire soon, he seems to have better relations with Shunsui as it stands. But, perhaps there was something he could do to mend the relationship between Kurosaki Ichigo and Soul Society. He made a mental note to remind himself to contact Kurosaki when he returned from Hawako Mundo, and then Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, Sotaicho of the Gote 13, slowly rose to his feet. The time for reflection had passed. Now, he needed to work towards the future. Let's review. Urahara, Yoruichi, Hitsugaya, Rukia, Renji and Chad were sitting at the table in Urahara's shop, while Tessai brought out some tea for everyone. We need to decide what to do now to best protect the living world, Hitsugaya continued, so we need to understand our own situation. Renji snorted. We're about to be cut off from Soul Society, Ichigo's gone to Hawako Mundo, Ishida's having a breakdown from revelations about his power, and the strawberries keeping secrets with Kuchiki Taicho. That about cover it. Mostly, Urahara agreed. Uryu-kun will likely be largely unavailable, as he'll be searching for that contract. I took the liberty of downloading all of Mayuri's notes about the Quincy, so with any luck we can avoid any unfortunate skirmishes between them. Rukia nodded, looking somewhat relieved. She'd never liked the Taicho of the 12th Division, and she'd heard the story of what had happened with Ishida's grandfather. That leaves us with two of our heaviest hitters, Ichigo and Ishida, out of the picture for the time being. Kurosaki Isshin will probably help when he can, but has his two daughters to take care of. Likewise, Ishida Rukin will protect the Karakura hospital. Speaking from experience, asking him to do more is useless. Hitsugaya nodded, remembering when he'd sent Rukia and Rangaku to request Rukin's services while Cazador de la Luna had been in control and in Hawako Mundo. Sato-san, It's likely we're going to need your help more often. The giant merely nodded. Ichigo is counting on us to protect Karakura while he's gone. I'll do my best. The ice-wielding Taicho turned to Renji. Abarai Fukuteicho, how is Kuchiki-san progressing? She's getting stronger, Renji replied calmly. Soda no Shirayuki has begun to use her Shikai attacks against Rukia. Rukia's Kido is also growing stronger as a result. Excellent. Kuchiki-san, how is Abarai's Kido? Much better, Rukia admitted. He's got a good grasp of the fire element spells up to Hado 54, Heian. We'll be going over electric spells next. Impressive progress, given the short time you've had to work with, Urahara complimented. Especially considering Abarai-kun's previously poor control. Very impressive. Rukia jumped, startled, not expecting Tessai's voice from right behind her. When Ichigo returns, I may have you join in our sessions. I am interested to see your method of teaching Kido. Swallowing and calming her racing heart, Rukia slowly nodded. Apparently that was enough to satisfy the former Taicho of the Kido Corps, as he politely refilled everyone's tea before moving back into the kitchen. Going back to our discussion, I'll be quite busy assisting in manipulating the Dongai, in addition to maintaining and upgrading the barrier that limits Hell's attacks. Urahara began where they had left off. The amount of power needed to rip open a path through closely tied dimensions is actually quite little, as you all should know. Even the lowest grade Shinigami can open Senkaimon, and Hollows can instinctually open Garganta easily enough. My job is to make it as near to impossible as I can, at least for Hell, the exile continued. Between Tessai, Mayuri and myself, we've set up a dimensional barrier, basically reinforcing our dimension's borders against Hell to the point where it takes someone powerful to open the path. Unfortunately for us, Hell has a, pardon the term, ungodly amount of power that can be utilized to a limited extent by the Togabito. It's analogous to the Ryo, essentially, so tremendously strong that even the air carries his spiritual energy throughout his realm, helping Shinigami grow stronger. This is why we're working with the Dongai. By the time we're done, it should take a combination of a Hell becoming personally involved, and a lot of luck, to be able to send Togabito to the living world. Hell should, and I do mean, should, only be able to send a limited number of his forces at a time before having to recover. Urahara shrugged. But, I have no idea how long that recovery time is. The only person I could compare against would be Ichigo, and ever since he killed Aizen, I haven't seen him brought low enough to need rest to regenerate his energy. But until you've got everything set up, you'll need us to run interference, Renji acknowledged, understanding. Urahara nodded. Exactly. So I have some equipment to give out. He handed everyone present one of the devices that he'd given Ichigo previously. These are single-dimensional radios all bound to the same channel. They go in your ear, he continued, demonstrating, and will allow us to communicate instantly regardless of distance. Please keep them in at all times. I will remotely activate them when Togabito are detected in the living world. Why do we need these? Rukia asked curiously. They are a precautionary measure, the shopkeeper replied gravely. We must be prepared for tactics that involve Hell sending waves of Togabito to different areas of Karakura. By having instant communication like this, we are able to better respond and coordinate to counter threats. They also serve as emergency beacons, so if you fall in combat someone can quickly locate and treat you, Urahara added. Accepting the explanation, Rukia gently pushed the device into her left ear. The others did the same. Wait, Hitsugaya suddenly said. Yoruichi-san, you were head of the Onmitsukido, and Taicho of the 2nd Division once. Can you give us some insight into Hell? Why isn't Hell continuing the assault? Why didn't he send more Togabito? There was silence for a minute. I cannot be certain, Yoruichi began slowly. There are a number of factors at play. First, Hell was resurrected extremely recently. He may not be at full power, or he may be searching out his remaining soul fragments. Second, he showed an interest in Ichigo. He may have kept the numbers low so Ichigo would have felt there to be an opportunity to return to Hell, as he did. It would then follow that as Ichigo separated his inner Togabito from himself, Hell is preoccupied with that Togabito Ichigo. Third, this was a test run, to examine our defenses and determine the best approach. He may be analyzing the data, or perhaps doing the same to Hawako Mundo as we speak. In the end, there is no way to know, Yoruichi concluded. We must make the best use of the time we have. Get some rest, and don't bother with shifts. If Togabito arrive, Kazuki's machines will alarm quite loudly. If you're not woken by that, I'll have Tessai do it. Kazuki and I will take care of any hollows. Togabito Ichigo awoke once again, held up by several chains. Once again, he tested his strength against the chains, and as always, the chains held steady. Damn it! Hell had quickly and effortlessly captured the Togabito shortly after he'd kicked Ichigo out of his dimension. Ever since, he'd been bound by the chains against some ultra-smooth wall. There was no escape from it. He couldn't even bite his tongue and bleed to death in the hopes of being resurrected sooner or later within the Hell dimension. He'd tried it the last time he had awoken here, and the only thing that had happened was that he'd spat out a lot of blood before passing out. Togabito Ichigo did a quick check. Yes, his tongue was entirely there. Either it had regenerated, or he'd actually died and Hell had promptly resurrected him and stuck him back on the wall. Well, that's frustrating. Awake, I see. Togabito Ichigo focused his attention towards the bastard who'd locked him up there. Hell. You have me at a disadvantage, Hell remarked with a smile. You know my name, but I don't know yours. I have no name, Togabito Ichigo spat. I wasn't in Ichigo's soul long enough to be given one, not when he didn't trust me. I see. Hell came closer, inspecting him. But you were born from more than the soil of Kurosaki Ichigo's soul. My Reiatsu gave the seed. So what? So, you have been cast out of Ichigo. Now you are reliant on my power to even exist. Hell reached out and gently lifted a few links of the chain that protruded from Togabito Ichigo's chest. If I were to cut this chain, your power would dwindle to nothing, merely from the exertion of maintaining your own form. And if you die, there'll be no one to protect Kurosaki Masaki from the Togabito who would so dearly love to sample such pure spirit. Hell smiled. Or from me deciding she's not worth keeping around and crushing to join the sands of the desert. Togabito Ichigo grit his teeth. Hell was right, on all counts. What do you want? Why, I want you to protect Kurosaki-san, Hell answered easily. And if I have need of you on occasion, then I will want you to be pliant and do as you're told. Fine, let me out. Hell's smile grew a little wider. Now, is that any way to address your master? Biting back the urge to spit in his face, Togabito Ichigo swallowed his pride and bowed his head. Please loose me from your chains, Hell-sama. Much better. Without even a gesture from Hell, the chains loosened and then vanished. Togabito Ichigo landed on his feet and refrained from lunging at Hell. It would serve no purpose at this time. Besides, I need to know what I'm capable of. I'm separated from Ichigo now, so I have no idea if I have Zangetsu or Cazador de la Luna. Now then, we need a proper name for you. I can't just call you Ichigo, now can I? Hell mused aloud. You're a reflection, of sorts, but with my influence. Oh, what is that phrase that humans coined? Ah, yes. Turning back to face Togabito Ichigo, Hell smiled. The road to Hell is paved with good intentions, isn't it? Then I shall call you Zani, for you will pave the road for me, all in the name of saving your mother. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.